Welcome back to here with Goldberg. Today I'll be talking about why India will collapse. And towards the end of the segment, I'm going to provide some useful advice if you happen to be an OG curry cell. So I got this comment recently, and the fellow goes, "What's all this talk about genetics? Like they even matter? That's something the Nazis would say. Focus on having good values and doing self-improvement." Made me chuckle. If you ever heard the story of the crypto queen, she was born in Bulgaria but moved to Germany around the age of 10. This is a legal, rational society. You obey authority, don't try to skirt rules or regulations. You are an upstanding citizen, even if you may not have a sense of humor. Well, she excels in the educational realm, gets the undergrad, the master's, studies at Oxford, ultimately attains a PhD. She could have had her own business, been a consultant, law professor, possibly an EU commissioner. She's nurture maxing to the hilt. Magic soil, paperwork, environments. But what happens to the crypto queen? How did she get that title? She reverts back to her genetic predisposition and scams people. This is even before crypto was mainstream, to give you a sense of the timeline. Why do I say that? She was from a Romani background. For those of you who don't know, Romani and Sintra are a stone's throw from South Asians, genetically speaking. Strangely enough, we have Romani here in small town USA. It starts out, little girl or granny on the side of the road, "I'm homeless, I need money." And then before you know it, it's some middle-aged guy, clean cut, looks like he rolled out of bed around 9 a.m., had a shower, wearing fancy clothes. "Oh, I don't have a roof over my head. Whoa, whoa." And some MGTOW is going to claim I'm a misandrist, but it just doesn't quite add up. I've dealt with the Romani in Europe. They're thoroughly unpleasant people. And maybe some of the trad Christians or Muslim cells can chime in and explain just why the Romani exist. Like, what was the logic behind their creation? I've even encountered communist Europeans, push the boat out on every liberal issue, but you bring up gypsies, and all of a sudden, are we marching somewhere? When it comes to Indians, I would say they initially had a pretty good reputation in the West due to the early waves of Brahmin physicians, business owners, the participants in the genesis of the technology industry. They were the model minority, so they would cooperate. There weren't too many of them that you would really notice, and people could just look the other way. Not to mention you had those who'd set themselves up as some kind of guru, leading people to an ashram or providing spiritual knowledge to these disillusioned Westerners in the 70s and 80s, a la Hare Krishna. Unfortunately, as the Indian subcontinent has heightened its obsession with expelling excess males into any other part of the world that will take them, and simultaneously more South Asians are gaining access to the internet.com, you might say the curry is souring. And we have to hone in on this because it will contribute to what's going to happen to India in particular and likely surrounding countries. Lately, you've seen much discussion of this concept known as izzat. And to put it simply, it's a way of saving face and defending one's honor, but it will take some ridiculous forms. You might even see it from well-educated Indians and South Asians who will try to win an argument in the digital space by reaching back for anything, pulling anything from their ass. And they will even defend a position that's indefensible. If someone makes a valid observation or criticism of what happens in India, they'll either simply repeat it back to the person or devolve into the most cringy, poorly socialized mode of communication you can possibly imagine. The litany of typical retorts you'll come across is one, "Oh, those are just Muslims in general," or "those are Pakistanis, they're Bangladeshis," and that's ironic because Bangladesh exists as a distinct political entity largely due to the intervention of the Indian military. At times, they will praise the Sikhs as the benefits that India has provided to the world. In other cases, "Oh, those Khalistani bastards, they're not true Indians." And to be sure, there is tremendous ethno-religious and ethno-linguistic diversity in the Indian subcontinent, but trying to claim that your run-of-the-mill Pakistani who's a Muslim and Indian Hindu, that there's this chasm between them is utter nonsense. There's tremendous overlap in the culture, the behavior, and it's the reason why they tend to be grouped, whether they appreciate that or not. You may hear, "We are CEO, Sar, we are taking over." I'll mention that later on because it is pertinent to our discussion. Alternatively, you might stumble across, "Your sister does OnlyFans." And this is a bizarre mode of attack because from the South Asian women I've known, it almost seems it could be a tell. They've recounted having rather handsy relatives, occasionally handsy brothers. So I'm not sure if it's one of those things where you fantasize about your sister doing that, so you try to fling it at another individual or another group. And of course, if you mention problems with public sanitation in the subcontinent, almost invariably they start spamming stills from Scat Prawn in the replies. Number one, how many Westerners are actually crazy for that content? Two, what does it say about you maintaining those images on your desktop hard drive or your smartphone? So once more, you get this sense they're trying to win an argument, but it makes them look terrible. And maybe it's poor socialization, maybe it's a language barrier, but you can't just ignore it if you see this pattern on a consistent basis. Just to be clear, this issue of sanitation is not being made up to insult people who are South Asian. It's a real problem. The irony is that there's an anecdote from back when the British were taking over India, and one of the local rulers was lamenting the fact that these guys don't know how to wash their asses and they're dominating us. What changed? Was it only something from the upper classes? Regardless, should be something where 99% of the population is on board with improving conditions, but that's not precisely what we see. I remember reading this book by, he was an Indian doctor educating in the United States, and I believe his father had passed away, so they were going to do the whole ceremony in the Ganges River. Well, he's a smart man, so he takes antibiotics, he prepares, still got extremely ill from wading into that body of water. There was the UN campaign to do it in the loo. Some people think it was funny. More critically, perhaps, this is in Haryana, India, no toilet, no bride. So pujas were telling curry cells, "I'm not going to become your wife if you don't have a toilet in the house." Well, some men were okay with it, but a decent number, "Oh, it's outrageous. It's a violation of our traditional values." I mean, traditional values? Not all traditions are good, my friends. So yeah, collectively, South Asians should be of the opinion if you publicly crap, you're going to be beaten or worse. Zero tolerance. Not this sort of, "Oh, you're offending our culture," but going back to that whole dynamic of Izat, it's as though they would prefer to fall on that sword than to admit something has to change. Because I guess if they say, "Yeah, India has this problem," that means that they've been dishonored, which is utterly ridiculous. And whether it's that, whether it's, we talked about the whole thing with the sisters on OnlyFans, you should not allow people to live in a rancid environment or indeed be abused because of tradition and, oh, we can't allow someone to have a negative perception of us. In terms of the difficulties India faces economically, well, for one, it's tremendously corrupt, so it's hard to do business in that part of the world. You've got those holdouts of tradition that we just mentioned, which is going to be extremely unappealing to denizens of a modern developing economy. You also must contend with the reality that if you're a non-dominant religious group or a Western corporation and you want to build a community center or a production plant, there is a high probability some Hindu nutcases will show up and torch the place. This has been an endemic issue. And the sad part is that the Indian diaspora does fundraisers that benefits RSS and other unhinged Hindutva type orgs. There have been attacks on Muslims. Now, I'm not saying Muslim cells are always innocent, but there have been certainly some flashpoints where it was like, what exactly were they doing to deserve that type of behavior? And so, as much as Narendra Modi is trying to worship at the altar of neoliberalism, it's going to be difficult for anyone to invest in India long term if they know that you've got these low IQ religious radicals that can ruin their day at any moment if they don't like where things are going or they feel like you're ruffling the feathers of their trad ideas. Tandem to these development questions would be the fate of younger South Asians. So in the past, what you do, you bust your ass, you get out of that crappy environment, which we can't hate on them for doing so. You're grinding to get the computer science degree. Maybe your parents climbed up the sides of the school and gave you the answers to the test through the window. Fake it till you make it. You go to the US. Problem is, now you've got AI affecting jobs in India, obviously AI affecting things in Western countries, more hostility to immigration and H-1Bs. So you're just a regular Sandeep, you show up in the West, there's no guarantee you're going to be Satya Nadella. And Satya Nadella is a far above average intelligence Indian. He didn't want to leave India. That's an important point. It's not this desperation trying to flee. So they're being sold the notion of I'm going to be this pioneer, I'm going to be like a Peter Thiel, and then they end up with a ceiling of shift lead at Tim Hortons. Would you like fries with that? It's not just a problem in the sense of them being crestfallen, that they don't get to be Andrew Tate, top OG gangsta. But what is the appeal of a sub-5 Indian male as the pujas are beginning to flex their own muscles? A lot of pujas, you'll see these Instagram reels. I should have been married by 25, but instead I got a master's degree and my father is still proud of me. They are going in that direction. They're getting more accolades, earning their own money, and now they're starting to recognize maybe I don't need to just be a trad wife. Remember, and this is the BJP, allegedly conservative government, they put that untouchable woman as president. And yes, it's ceremonial, but it still says to your average puja that I don't simply have to be what my mom or my grandmother was. And you best believe that some of those Indian mothers and grandmothers are telling the daughters, the granddaughters, don't allow yourself to fall into this trap. If you can escape, you have education, you have some fiat. Certainly not helping the situation is that Indian men, in large part due to the internet, have developed a terrible reputation. We're long past the era of just saying, let me show you, son, how to use Excel on YouTube. Unfortunately, technology is opening this box. And in the past, a puja would only hear about some terrible story if she was in part of that community. Many of them were illiterate. They're not going to read a newspaper. But all you need is a smartphone. There was a documentary about actual untouchalas, so women at the very bottom of the Indian totem pole, and they were starting their own news service. They'd go film stuff with smartphones and write blog posts. That is quite significant. The reason I believe India banned TikTok is because they realized that women were starting to wake up to how much has been essentially ramrodded down their throat. Oh, this is just how it's always been done. And you have to appreciate, in the West, we call it the Borg Collective with women. They will all start converging, they'll have a herd mentality. In South Asia, it's the Onion Baji Collective. So even if you as a Sandeep are not guilty, even if it was Raj, or maybe it was a Muslim and you're Hindu, they start putting you in the same group. Oh, I'm under threat from preferably low status males. So this was actually a tourist, but that happened to her. Not exactly a good outcome by any stretch. Here's another story. This Pooja, she was doing tennis competitions and also instruction. Whether she was earning more money than her father or she was getting close to him in her income, his curry comrades were going, ha ha, she's emasculating you. And he began rage pilling, put a couple bullets in the back of her head. This story was all over Indian news and social media because what's occurring is that now Pujas are comparing notes. Yeah, I had a father who was a controlling freak. I had a brother who was too handsy. This is all Indian men. All Indian men are the same way. And it is absolutely devastating because when you start talking about people coupling or not doing so, when women begin to believe that they're under threat and they have the option to go a different way, all bets are off. And let's not forget the rise of online dating with a smartphone. In the past, she might have two or three fellows from decent families to choose from. But now, she's matching with Chad Preet. And he may only pump and dump her, but now he becomes the baseline of what they expect. Let's tether that to what was just mentioned, where they believe low status males are all out to get them, are predators. It's like that London Road song. You ultimately think it could be him. In addition, a couple years back, I did a video entitled They're Coming for the Pujas. It broke the internet and has never recovered since. My point was that with Hollywood, you start seeing the placement of pujas like in that Spice Shop movie with Dylan McDermott. You had Quantico. You have Priyanka Chopra with not Nick Fuentes, the other Nick. And yeah, you might say those are just celebrities, but the relevance is crucial when you consider the Indian diaspora. Let's say you've got a Pooja in Chennai. She's working on her master's degree, but she has a cousin who's the daughter of an H-1B or someone who came over a diversity lottery. That gal lives in SoCal, and she's, with her Instagram, openly flaunting a white normie boyfriend, or a Latino, or a rice cell, maybe even a Clarence. Now, historically, Clarences had to bend Poojas over on the down low. And it's funny because when they had recently put the location markers on Twitter profiles, it turned out most of these cuckold type accounts promoting brothers with Becky's were actually run by Indians. So just like with the OnlyFans, what does it say about how their mind is functioning? Perhaps it was a good way to generate some SEO bucks. But still consider that cousin Pooja is with her normie boyfriend and she puts a video. The Pooja in Chennai is going, wait a second, so I could have that too. I might be able to get normie. I might be able to get a swag brother who knows how to dance or a Latino. Once more, you're striking at the cornerstone of how India has functioned, how people have made it. When the regular looking female, and this is why I emphasize Priyanka Chopra is pretty, but she's closer to a stereotypical Indian than, let's say, Aishwarya Rai. It completely changes the perspective, the point of view of these gals. And that is going to be absolutely devastating. We already see birth rates in a number of states in India aren't doing so well. This is going to crater in the next 10 or 15 years. And the Indian government will try to cover it up, but you'll see it with other data that's coming out of India. You'll see it on Reddit. You'll see it in Indian social media, them talking about how they're not being able to find people. This is already occurring. Why do you think they keep expelling their men to other parts of the world? Because there's just too many of those and not enough jobs, certainly not enough women who are willing to bend the knee or bend over. Laying all that aside, how can OG curry cells respond to present conditions? It's like that classic song, Show me what I'm looking for. Na, na. We're seeing these articles in Indian news media about silent divorce. Poojas have been married 10, 15 years, popped out a few kids, and now they're subjecting the husband to a dead bedroom situation. Or they're on Tinder. They're trying to shack up with a personal trainer because they say, you have nothing else to give me, and I have nothing to lose. If you happen to be low tier normie, but especially sub 5 curry, and this is genuine on my part, embrace MGTOW. It sounds cringe, but you got to realize the position that you're in. If you have a decent job in the West, you make good money, and preferably there's location independence, you can work remote or transfer to different installations, I would say buy like a 2-bedroom bungalow or condo that you can pay off, make your own, focus on your hobbies. If you really feel it's necessary, you'll have to pay more, but a couple times a year, GeoMax to get it out of your system. But otherwise, just go clear. And you're going to have to cut the cord with your toxic culture and family because they're going to be like, where are the grandchildren? Just understand they were doing the same thing their grandparents, great grandparents did. A lot of this tradition is just stuff that's imposed and oftentimes not questioned. In the West, there's been a tradition for a long time of mutilating the privates of baby boys, and that's still defended by people that should know better. The Hindu or indeed Muslim populations are not shrinking anytime soon, so you don't have to feel, oh, I'm betraying my people. Don't lose out on the optionality that you possess here and now simply because you feel obligated to do something that was done before. Under no circumstances should you wife up a westernized Pooja. She doesn't have an accent. She's almost certainly a turbo thought. Not saying if she has an accent she can't be, but we're just mentioning odds here. You look at the Akash Singh situation. He worked hard trying to build up status, have money, have a career. He had his V plates when he got married. And this gal did not have the common courtesy to keep her mouth shut. She's going around bragging about how these Chad bros were passing around like a piece of meat. So cringe, and he'll never live it down. A lot of times, these ethnic women, they try to make up for the lost time of their mothers or grandmothers, and they might just get pumped and dumped. But you don't want to be the bailout for that because she's just going to be resentful towards you. It's much like when you go back to the question of those women posting with their boyfriend on like an Instagram reel, you'll see in the comments, oh, what's wrong with Indian boys? Hatred towards Indian men. And that's only going to make that woman be more indignant and disgusted by your existence, particularly if you end up being her only option to have the white picket fence. By the same token, do not bail out a Guadalupe or a Becky or a Victoria. These women are going to see you as a meal ticket, nothing more, and you're going to be in a dead bedroom situation soon enough, but she's going to continuously demand that you shower money on her. You worked hard throughout your life. You deserve better than to be seen as essentially an ATM. If you absolutely feel compelled to reproduce, do not import a puja to a Western country because then you're going to have to buy her a fancier house than necessary in a good neighborhood, good school district, save up money for the kids' college, give her the Porsche Cayenne. If her friend Apurva is being taken to Sandals Resort twice a year, you have to do the same. Otherwise, she's going to feel neglected and not appreciated. You'll just spend your existence being a debt slave, and you really don't know if 10 years down the road that six-figure IT job is still going to be in your hands. So what happens once the money supply runs out, but she has an expectation of, I'm going to live at these standards like my friends? Alternatively, take your fiat from the United States, which will go a lot further in the subcontinent. Find a decent area. Like I've heard northeastern India is superior to other regions. And if you can get a puja who's not a turbo thought, you will provide her with a decent life, but it's not going to be at the level of the United States. And then still there, I would say have only daughters because they're going to fare better in the future, whether they try to career max or they do OnlyFans, LOL. The key point to realize is that if you just had an opportunity at freedom, don't turn yourself into a slave because of the tradition.